Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about how to stay warm when sleeping in your hammock. This is my war bonnet Blackbird. It's what I've been using lately. Behind the hammock you see this giant mountain of different ways people try to use to stay warm in a hammock. And I've been sleeping in hammocks for several years now, about a decade. And when I started, I just took what I was using in the tent and brought it into the hammock with me. Started working out great until the weather got cold. And that first year was a little trial and error. We figured out a pretty good way to do it. I'll go over that for the budget-minded person, and then I'll go over what I'm using now, which is the quilt systems. All right, the first thing you're going to want to do when you get into some cold weather hammock camping is, if you don't have a quilt, you're going to have to find some kind of insulation. This is your El Cheapo Deluxe Walmart foam pad. Some mini cell foam. It's got like a little egg grate. I think these are like $10 or something like that. Real close to it, maybe 13, maybe a big spend for you. But this is what everyone takes in the woods if you don't want to buy the super expensive stuff. I have some of the foldy ones, but this has been with me for quite some time. And you know, you roll it out there, you put it on the ground. Well, I was doing that in my tent, and I came to the hammock. I left this at home. First time I tried to camp when it was cold, I realized that was a big mistake. And so a little trial and error happened, and basically you're still going to need something to keep the cold out from underneath you. No matter what kind of bag you got on the ground or in a hammock, it's going to compress that insulation underneath. You're going to lose the heat. What makes it worse in a hammock is you got a little airflow going. And if you watch my video, it should be up there in the corner, you'll see how I can constrict the airflow or stop it with my tarp shelter. But let's talk more about the sleep system today. So you got the egg crate. This is called Radiaflect. It's about 1/8 of an inch thin. I don't know if you can see that. There's a little foam core in there. Both sides reflective lining. This is a scrap piece off a job, and this is some really good stuff. You can throw that in there. Super lightweight. You can see it just kind of floats in the air. This is a little bit thicker. It's about 1/4 of an inch thick. It's bubble wrap, two-sided with foam. And you can pick this up at a home improvement store. Roll that out in there. This pretty cheap. Works a little better than the mini cell foam. Not as durable. But what you're going to do is going to go ahead and place this in there before you put it in your sleeping bag. Voila, not much to it. Now, bear in mind, I did this for years before I got the quilts, so I know this works. That's your insulation from beneath. The next, you're going to need a bag. All right, so this is my Snug Pack Softy Elite 5. It's a good bag. The bag I used mostly when I started doing this was the military 3-in-1 sleep system, 4-in-1. The MSS, as it's called. It's got a survival rating of -55 if you use the bivy and all your other cold weather gear as well while inside of it. This bag is not quite as keep you alive in all situations, but it's about half the weight and half the size. The sleep system is about 13 pounds. And I've used the sleep system in Alaska. I've slept in the open rain with it with the bivy, and it works. I woke up dry. It's all synthetic, as is this bag. So it's going to keep you alive, you know, in very bad conditions. But this, I like it if you're doing any kind of packing whatsoever and you don't want down. With my former job, I couldn't use down because I couldn't control my destiny. We might be sleeping in the rain, and you can't just say, hey, I'm not going to go camp tonight because it's raining. No, we were going to be out in it no matter what. And so I couldn't depend on down, so I had to have some synthetic stuff. The sleep system is just too heavy at 13 pounds. And this was a good compromise. Still warm enough to keep me going, and water resistant enough to keep me going. But if I had to depend on just the bag, it would be the sleep system. All right, now we've got the sleep system, or the sleeping bag, on top of the mat. And that's pretty much going to keep you warm, you know, pretty warm down into the 50s, 40s, and you'll have no trouble with that. With the sleep system, you can take this into the 30s no problem, just like you got it here. Now, you might want to be a little more comfortable than just okay. I've got a couple more tricks. This is a woobie. Terrible name. If you're not from the military circles, you probably never heard of it. But this is just a very lightweight synthetic blanket. And military guys have quite the affinity for their woobies. I've heard of marriages ending over wives throwing the beloved woobie away. It's kind of a joke, but it's still pretty funny. These are probably the single most important invention ever created for the military. Above any weaponry or anything else is the woobie. This thing will keep you alive. So with the woobie, what you want to do is keep all your heat in. But it's kind of porous. It won't let wind through. It's got two sides with a little, thin quilted synthetic insulated value there. But what it will do is allow most of your breath to pass through. Moisture will get out, keeping your heat in. So what you want to do with this is put corner to corner over there and just drape it over. I'll show you how to do it. So now it's draped over, corner to corner. What you can do is take these strings and just tie a quick overhand, and then tie your shoe knot on both sides on your ridge line. If your hammock does not have a ridge line, just string you a little ridge line up, and this will keep it from falling off in the middle of the night. Now, you can also manage your heat. If you're getting too warm, you can pull it off the head side. Keep this side warm. Let it breathe. If you think you're getting too much moisture, you can open up this side, and that way when you breathe, it'll let the vapors out on the foot end. So this is the way I would normally do it, just to keep a little airflow so it didn't get too damp. You don't want your insulation to get damp. Another quick note, don't ever close your bag up over your head. You get in there, you're breathing warm air, but it only works for a little while because all that air you breathe in there is very moist, and it creates a moist environment, and you lose your R value of your insulation. You actually get colder that way. The way the bivy system on the MSS works is it's got baffles around your neck, and you're supposed to seal that tight, then put the bivy over. That way you keep your breath warm, which does heat you, but it doesn't allow the moisture to go down into your body portion of your sleeping bag. That's very important. So if you're going to have too much moisture, you got to let it out this way. And this is keep you good right here. This is the magic formula. If you don't have a quilt, get you a really good sleeping bag, down synthetic, doesn't matter. Put you a pad under there, get you a woobie, and you're good to go. If it gets really, really cold, you need to take it one step further. This is my war bonnet tarp. If you have a Hennessy, it comes on there. And what you do with the Hennessy is just don't tie up your fly, just let it droop as long as you don't have very inclement weather. Let it droop, and that's another layer of keeping your heat in. With this tarp, I'll show you how to do it. So I actually have crash buckles installed on my straps over here. You may or may not be able to see that. But this just hooks onto the crash buckle real quick. So the tarp's on there. So there's no ridge line with this setup. So basically, it's a seal nylon tarp, folds over. That keeps a little more wind off everything. You can weight this bottom with a Nalgene bottle or just tie it out or let it drape. I would just let it drape. This configuration here will get you down really, really cold, will keep you a lot warmer than anything else. Have the woobie. The woobie will let the vapor out of the immediate area, and it'll trap on this tarp. So you'll have some moisture build up there in the morning, but it won't be inside on you. And this is a good, really cold configuration. Now, some of these different companies make a sock, which is basically what we're doing here. But they have maybe a little port for the vapor to get out of from your breath. If you don't want to pay for all that, this is the kind of thing you need to do. Whatever you have to do to get these configurations, you can use a poncho or just a cheap tarp or whatever you got, make something. If you don't have the quilts, this is how you do it. So I did that system for years. It's a little bulky. It's what I had. I was making it work. In the job, I had a setup where I would leave it there, then we'd also go out further into the field. And with that setup, I would take, more pared down offering of gear. But this was kind of like my home base, that I would leave set up. But I kept hearing about these things called quilts, top quilts, bottom quilts, and I had to check them out. So I checked them out online, and when I saw the price tag, I pretty much stopped checking them out. But I kept coming back to the idea. I said, well, why don't I make some? So I did. I made a couple quilts with synthetic down, some regular, like just cheap insulative stuff you get at the the big box stores. And they worked fantastic, but they were really bulky because I couldn't get them too compact. If I got enough insulation to keep me warm, it was just these giant things as big as a sleeping bag, and it just wasn't working. So my wife talked me into springing for it one year, and I went ahead and got the new love of my life, outside of my wife, of course. And that is what we call the Hammock Gear incubator and the Hammock Gear burrow. 0 degrees with a little bit of overstuff. Now let me introduce you to the love of my life. So this is the Hammock Gear incubator 0 with a little bit of overstuff in there. Overstuff means they just throw a little extra down in for you. You got 2 sides, has an S-beaner, everything's on bungees, and all you got to do, gathered end hammocks or Hennessy style. If you have a bottom entry Hennessy, it's not going to work. You got to get a different one. But if you have a bridge hammock or something like that, you also have to get a different one. But this is for asymmetrical gathered end hammocks, that kind of thing. This is like being in your mother's womb. You take your S-beaner, just clip it on your suspension of your hammock. You just drop your hammock right in there. So mine's already geared to being on this hammock. But what you do is you have these little adjustment things here where you just pull. You get it right. You want to cinch this down. It's a baffle. Keeps the airflow from coming in and out. They got that on both sides. And you can tension this way. If you have a different kind of setup where you need it, they have these little points here where you can run a line over, keep it up. I've never had to use it. One word of caution. I've never done it, but I've heard that you can miss your hammock and sit in your quilt, and you don't want to do that. But that thing right there is amazing, the amount of heat that comes into your body. So you're going to have about 4 inches, maybe 5, depending on how much stuff you have in there, in this part under your body, generating heat that comes up on your back. It's something new. That if you've never used a bottom quilt or an under quilt on a hammock, I don't care what you've used, you've never felt heat just radiating into you like that. And I've used everything that's out there. But this is by far the most comfortable start to sleeping warm. At this point, you can use anything. You can use a top quilt, you can use a sleeping bag, whatever you're going to want to use. But this bottom quilt is the key to staying warm in a hammock. So this is the Hammock Gear Burrow 0 degrees. Fantastic piece of gear. It's the top quilt. You can get them in a square where they have snaps here to make the foot box, or sewn in. And I opted for the sew in because I'm not going to walk around with camp with this. This is just going to be in my hammock or not out at all. So that's all you have to do. You're sleeping warm. I put a beanie cap on, and this thing has a buckle in the back, if you want to buckle that up, and a drawstring right up front, so I can cinch that thing around my neck, keep all my heat in. So another big advantage to the quilt system in a hammock is that anybody that's used a sleeping bag in a hammock has done the little wrestling tug-of-war getting set. So you got to get in there, especially if you have a Hennessy with the bottom entry. But you get in there, you're like pulling it and sitting up and moving it left and right and trying to get it zipped. It takes about 2-3 minutes to get comfortable and set up. And then you hope you didn't forget to use the bathroom or something. With the quilts, it takes care of all that. You basically just push it out of the way, and you sit in your hammock, and you basically just, get in the hammock. Once you're in here, you just put your feet up in the foot box, and you're sleeping. So warm. Nothing beats the quilts, I'm telling you. I've done everything. I've camped every conceivable way there is in the woods. On the ground, in the air, just laying in the rain, you know, in a bag, in a tent, in every kind of tent, on the tundra in Alaska, to just steamy hot everything, where you just 12 o'clock at night, you got sweat rolling off. The best way to sleep is a hammock for me, and the quilts are the best way to stay warm in a hammock. A little bit of room used up in your bag or your kayak, but once you get where you're going, there's no looking back. This is the way to go to stay warm. So that's how I found over the years the best way to stay warm. I recommend the Hammock Gear quilts over everything else I've used. There are several brands of quilts out there. They are a bit pricey. Hammock Gear has just come out with their Econ line, which is about $100 less than their full-on line. A little bit of different feel and a little different material from what I hear, but it's still going to be a great price for a 0-degree quilt. If you can manage to get the budget for the quilts, you'll never be disappointed. It's a decision I don't regret. Several of my friends also have them, and they love them as well. Thanks for watching.